They say power corrupts, and after shooting 1,000 rounds through my Sig P210, I get it. Because I've gotten greedy for effortless accuracy and casual bullseyes, for a no BS 3-pound trigger, for a gun that translates my grandiose ambitions for accuracy into a stark, authoritarian reality of my own design, with zero protest, zero resistance, and 100% fucking loyalty. So, my fellow gun hipsters, you want to be ballers, shot callers? Do you crave the power to make 9mm bullets wholly subservient to your will? Behold, the Sig P210. And yes, this is the American version because I ball out at the range, not the bank.
It was a smoking gun. 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 It was a smoking gun.
Alright, what up hipsters? The Sig P210. And I guess it was inevitable that I would feature a Sig P210 at some point because it is just so important to the history of handguns, and it has this kind of elite bougie pedigree that I think handgun enthusiasts just all recognize, appreciate, and want. And as I said, we'll get into this, but this is the American-made version. We'll get into some of the differences between this and the original European versions. But I guess to start off, with any conversation about the Sig P210 of any variety, kind of has to begin with accuracy. So yeah, this gun is really freaking accurate. And I don't think that's going to be any surprise to anyone watching this, but I mean, let's be honest here, there is no shortage of accurate handguns out there, you know, and there's no shortage of accurate handguns that make, you know, shooting to point of aim pretty easy. You've seen many of them on this channel. The Beretta PX4, the HK P9S, the Archon Type B, the 1911. What does the P210 do differently? I will say that there is just a qualitative difference in how this gun shoots and how it delivers its accuracy that is just unique and satisfying. There is just something poignantly purposeful about the way the P210 does accuracy. The P210 does accuracy like Steven Seagal does wrist fractures. The P210 does accuracy like Peter North does busty blondes. Clean, efficient, precise, professional, almost stoic in a way. And you know, everything about this gun, from the way the trigger breaks to the way it points to the surgical build quality, it just feels very intentional. It feels like every aspect of the design is just kind of, you know, intended to serve accuracy. In that sense, it feels efficient. It feels kind of functional, but it does feel good. It feels efficient and functional in a way that's just kind of alluring. So I think that gives you a sense of what the P210 is and why it is, and why you might like it, because it's very accurate and really cool. But I want to talk about the fact that this is, again, the American P210 that began production in 2017, and it is not the original Swiss P210. Also, I should note that the American P210, the P210A, comes in 3 flavors, or at least it came in 3 flavors. The standard, which this is, the target, and the carry. And the standard and the target are mechanically identical. The target just has adjustable target sights, and a fancy like target style grip. It also has front slide serrations. The standard doesn't have that. And the carry has a shorter slide. It has, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch shorter slide, and it uses an aluminum frame. And the carry also uses a simplified barrel cam design that is a little different from the full-size P210As. As far as I know, the Target is the only one that's still available new, and it's the only one listed currently on Sig Sauer's website. If you look on Gunbroker for like an original P210, it's gonna be like $3,000. And I mean, if you get one that's like beat up, maybe you can get it for less than that, but they're very expensive. And you know, the original P210s are just known to be like the Rolex of handguns. I mean, they're kind of what you would imagine a Swiss-made handgun to be. Everything was hand-fit, the finest quality steels, you know, everything is just super precise and super overbuilt, and the guns are just renowned for accuracy and renowned for being very, very expensive. So the purist in me, the pretentious hipster alter ego within me, is like, you know, I kind of want the real thing. This is just kind of it almost seems like a knockoff in a way, and that part of me thought that about it. Looking inside it, yes, the parts on the newer American-made P210s are all MIM, and probably MIM from overseas. You know, Sig gets a lot of their MIM from India. The barrel lockup is a little different from the original P210 design. The original P210 design used concentric barrel lugs like you'd see in a 1911 or Browning High Power. This uses the more quintessential Sig Sauer style ejection port lockup, which doesn't really change how it functions. This works just fine, and in some ways it can get tighter and more consistent than concentric barrel lugs. These things aren't like hand fit, and the slide and frame aren't like hand lapped. They I watched one video and the Sig engineer said they used chemical machining to get the tight fit on the newer American-made one. The extractor orientation's slightly different. It like on the original ones, the extractor was like in this little window that you could see through the slide. And the American P210 uses a captured guide rod assembly that's a little different from the original guide rod assembly in the Swiss guns, and it is prone to breakage. And you may, if you've been researching these guns, you may have come across some stuff about that in forums and whatnot. And I can tell you firsthand, it is a thing. I've broken 2 captured recoil assemblies in this gun. So that is bullshit. And you know, I got to call Sig out. They ignore the issue and they refuse to fix the issue. But I will say the issue is minor, and I'll get more into this as I get into the video, but it does not affect the gun's function at all. It just leaves you with an uncaptured recoil spring, and from the gun's perspective, it doesn't know or care if the recoil spring's captured or not. It simply just makes it a little less convenient to reassemble. This gun has been impressively reliable, over 1,000 rounds, runs any ammunition, FMJ, JHP, shitty remanufactured ammo, runs dirty. So with all that said, you know, I've had a good experience, other than that stupid recoil spring issue. I've had a good experience with this gun. But still the question remains, is this gun, is the American P210 worthy of the name P210? And I'll give you my honest opinion, and that is yes. And to justify that perspective, I'm going to look into the mechanics of the gun, and I'm going to show you that this gun has all the defining mechanical elements that make a P210 a P210. To kind of begin that, I'm going to talk about the origins of this gun and where it came from, and that, as many of you probably know, this gun's origins begin with the French M1935A pistol designed by Charles Petter. At its heart, the 1935A was kind of like, it worked kind of like a 1911. It had a swinging link barrel cam design like a 1911, but Petter introduced some interesting features that really set the pistol apart from its contemporaries. One was this bushingless muzzle design, and this is pretty ubiquitous on pistols today, but essentially it's just a the aperture on the front of the slide is sloped, so it still pinches the barrel at the end to give it support and tightness for the lockup, while allowing it to tilt up as the slide goes back. Another thing that Petter developed on the 1935A was this self-contained removable fire control group. And the sear, the hammer, the hammer strut and spring and the other little bits that held all that together, that was in a self-contained unit that could be removed and like easily tuned. And Petter also introduced this unique trigger bar design where it's a top pivoting trigger, but it pushes directly back on the sear, kind of like a 1911. And so it's kind of a hybrid in that respect. And what Petter did was he ran a trigger bar at a very steep angle from the back of the trigger here up to this top of the sear. And so it allows it to push up on the sear from below. So that's kind of a defining feature of the M1935A's design. So shortly before the war, the Swiss military was looking to replace the Lugers they've been using since the turn of the century, and they liked Petter's design, and I think I have read that they especially liked that idea of the removable unit and the fact that it was just a good, well-made gun that shot well, and it had good ergonomics and basically what they were looking for. So they took that, and a guy by the name of Max Mueller, who was kind of the lead engineer for Sig in Switzerland's firearms design department, he took that and basically redesigned it, scaled it up, made it bigger, made it tighter, made it, more of a heavy-duty military pistol that was suitable for a 9mm chambering. The 1935A used the 7.65 French long cartridge, which wasn't quite as powerful as 9mm. So in that process, Mueller introduced three very unique features that would continue to kind of define the P210, what would become the P210. And first of those was inverted slide rails, and that's where the slide rides inside the frame as opposed to the slide riding kind of on top of the frame, on the outside of the frame. I've heard a lot of people say this contributes to a lower bore axis or a lower recoil or something like that. I don't think the, orientation of the slide and frame rails has anything to do with really the bore axis, but what it does do, it allows the lockup to be more consistent, more precise. Having the slide right inside the frame just allows the motion of the slide to be more constrained, and it just contributes to a tighter lockup overall. In addition to the slide rails, Mueller designed the barrel cam to be kind of a closed slot. So we see this on some pistols, namely the CZ75, where instead of an open slot like you'd see in a Browning high power or a double action Sig, it was a closed loop, like a closed kidney-shaped loop. The slide stop passed through that, and it just made, again, further constrain the motion of the barrel and just made everything tighter. And finally, Mueller introduced a barrel integrated feed ramp onto the P210. The 1935 had more of a two-piece frame and barrel feed ramp like you'd see in a 1911, but he made this gigantic feed ramp that was just very deep, very wide. I mean, the Browning high power had a barrel integrated feed ramp, but nothing like what was on the P210. So going back to the American P210, if you think about all 6 of those key innovations that I just went through, the 3 things that Petter brought to the table, the bushingless muzzle, the self-contained fire control group, and the unique trigger bar geometry, and then the 3 things that Mueller brought to the table, the inverted slide rails, the closed slot cam path, and the uniquely wide and deep feed ramp, all 6 of those things are alive and well and functioning in pretty much the same configuration and geometry in this pistol as they are in the legacy P210s. So to me that says this really is a P210 from a functional standpoint, and certainly the materials and the manufacturing methods have changed since the late 40s when this gun was first conceived. But again, all those things function the way they function in the original guns. If that doesn't convince you, if the mechanics of the guns being the same, if that doesn't convince you that this is a legit dyed-in-the-wool, ride-or-die P210, let's talk about how the gun shoots. I've never experienced a pistol that so exactingly translates aim to impact. And a 1911 comes close. 1911s are great. So does the Beretta PX4, the HK P9S. But there's something more exacting and precise about the way the P210 allows you to place shots. The inputs just feel sharper and more focused in a way. The first thing you notice about the P210 is just how naturally and intuitively it aims. And I think part of that's because of the grip angle. It has a more angled grip, kicks back into your palm a little more than like a Beretta 92 or a Sig P226. It's honestly pretty close to a Glock, but it just kind of naturally pulls the muzzle down into this assertive orientation, and you just feel it's like the thing aims itself. Like I said, it's very natural, it's very intuitive. In a way, you kind of feel the gun's length reaching towards the target, and it is a long pistol. It's not an overly big pistol, but it is lengthy, and it seems to have a more forward center of gravity, and it's not front heavy per se, but the weight seems kind of distributed along its length more than some other guns, and it helps stabilize your point of aim, and the sights kind of fall into this natural static equilibrium. You feel very well set up to address this trigger seamlessly. And the wall is very defined and discernible. It's easy to find the wall, but the wall itself is very delicate, I would say. It's like brittle glass breaking. Light is an understatement. It's, 3 pounds. I've seen people measure the trigger on the P210As online, and it's often less than 3 pounds. I totally believe that. When the hammer falls, that's kind of where the magic happens in this gun. It has a nice snap to it, but it's not this, exaggerated thwack that you find on many hammer-fired guns, where you kind of feel the shock of the hammer falling reverberating through the pistol's frame. You don't feel much. It feels very insulated. The energy released by the hammer falling doesn't disrupt or undermine your point of aim. The reset of the trigger is kind of anemic, and if you ever shot a Browning high power, it's honestly a little better than that, but it's not very tactile, it's not very audible, but it's there, and you get used to it pretty quick, and it's fine. And shooting to reset isn't really, I think, what this gun's for, and it's for just placing shots. And the recoil impulse on the P210 is just similarly subdued, and I compared it to kind of a coasting freight train in my written review. You feel the weight coming back, but it's very relaxed, it's very smooth, like, again, almost like a train coasting. It's not as flippy as a P226, but it's not quite as straight back and direct as what you'd find in a Glock. And the bore axis is, lower than a P226, and it's a little bit higher than what you find in a Glock and most striker-fired pistols. So it's kind of somewhere in the middle, and honestly, that's kind of what the amount of muzzle rise feels like. It's kind of feels like it's in the middle. Everything about the shooting experience just feels purposeful and predictable. Everything you give the gun, it obeys faithfully and consistently, and you call the shots, it makes the hits, no questions asked. But that raises the question, what if you make a mistake? I've heard one fairly prominent YouTuber, Bloke on the Range with TFB TV, he's, I think, an Englishman, and he lives in Switzerland, and so he shoots a lot of these bougie European guns, but he had the interesting point that the P210 is so accurate that it's unforgiving. And at first glance, I guess that seems kind of counterintuitive, but I get what he's saying. And basically, if the gun is so faithful to, reflecting your inputs on the target, it's also going to obey the errors that you give it faithfully on the target. Again, I get that, that makes sense, but I think that ignores one thing, at least in my experience with the P210, is that the P210's refined inputs make it easier to avoid errors. As I've sought to express, I mean, the trigger on this thing is literally an easy button. Like, it is so light, it is so precise, it is so insulated. There were numerous times in the 1,000 rounds that I put through this gun where I thought maybe I kind of flubbed the trigger press or flinched or fucked it up in some way. But no, I mean, it put a round right in the bullseye. So the trigger pull on this thing's very forgiving, and just the weight, it is a heavy gun, the stability of it, and just the ergonomics that make it very easy to kind of engage the trigger seamlessly. I think this gun's very easy to shoot accurately. And in some ways, it's kind of ruined other guns for me. It was kind of an adjustment to go back to shooting, more normal service pistols after shooting this. But that brings another interesting perspective on the P210 to light. And I guess I would call this gun more of an aimer's pistol than a gamer's pistol. You have to consciously aim and try to place your shots with this gun, or you're not going to get the benefits of this gun. And like I said, it makes aiming and placing your shots very easy, and it's very forgiving in that regard. But if you just want to run and gun, if you just want to launch gratuitous salvos of bullets at steel plates, there are better options. There are guns with shorter resets, there are guns with flatter recoil impulses, there are guns with more capacity that are going to be better for steel matches and stuff like that. This gun is for just putting rounds exactly where the fuck you want them. And like I said, I haven't found a gun that does that better than the P210. And I guess that brings me to my next big point, and that is the P210 is probably the most perfect shooting gun I've ever experienced. But sometimes perfection isn't what we want, isn't what we're looking for, and it isn't what speaks to us, from an emotional standpoint. As good as this gun is, there are certain guns that just speak to me through the intangibles of the way they shoot and everything like that, and the ergonomics, more than this gun. The Beretta 92. That gun, it feels so good when it shoots. The feel of the trigger, the crisp snap of the trigger, to just the very engaging feel of the recoil impulse. It's almost like you're in a conversation with the gun. A 1911's trigger, while it's not quite as precise and exacting as the trigger on the P210, it feels better. It has a better feel to it. And again, I probably can shoot more precisely with this, but those guns just feel really, really good. And honestly, I think they feel a little better, subjectively, than what you get with the P210. That's not necessarily a criticism of the P210, more than just a acknowledgement of just how the gun is and how it shoots. It's just kind of a trait of what makes the P210 a P210. But this next point is a criticism of the P210. I told you I'd talk about the broken recoil assembly issue. And caveat, again, the gun works fine even if your recoil assembly breaks. So when the guide rod is not broken, there's a little screw that screws into the tip of the guide rod, and that holds the spring on the rod. And there's a washer under the screw too that holds that the spring bears against. So the screw breaks because it's made of pot metal and lies, and the spring comes off. So that means you've got to manually compress the spring when you put it in the gun. And again, the gun doesn't know the difference whether the spring's captured or not. The only reason it's captured is to help you install it. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but all you've got to do is basically, you have to position that washer in the spring tunnel in the gun, and I'll roll in some pictures. One thing I forgot to mention is that you need to put the barrel in before you position the washer in the spring tunnel. Otherwise, as you can see in that picture, the barrel will not have clearance to get past the washer. So just be sure you do that, as you can see in the picture there. And there's a little bevel on one side of the washer, and that's where the screw would sit if it was assembled correctly. Make sure that is oriented towards the muzzle, and then I find it helps to kind of put the washer on the guide rod without the spring, and then kind of guide it into the spring tunnel, pull the rod out so the washer is properly positioned in the spring tunnel. And then sometimes I'll stick the spring in there just to kind of make sure it's pushed up flush against the front of the spring tunnel. So once that's in there, then you take your spring, put it on the guide rod, and begin to compress it into the spring tunnel. And it'll want to squirm out and bow out, and you just gotta kind of put your hand to the side to keep it aligned as you're compressing it down to the spring tunnel. It can be a little bit of a challenge. And then before it gets, fully inserted, it'll kind of go solid. Like the spring will feel like it goes solid. But at this point, it's usually bound up. The rod isn't able to pass through the coils. So you've got to kind of wiggle it a little bit and push on the spring to get the spring through the rest of the coils. And once it does, you'll feel it kind of go in all the way. And then you can anchor the back of the guide rod in the barrel cam slot where it goes. The first few times it was frustrating, but now it doesn't take me that long and it's pretty easy to do. I will say there is an aftermarket solution from DPM Systems. They do have a spring that doesn't break, and a lot of people, if you read on Sig Talk and stuff, they use that and they have good luck with it. Again, not excusing Sig Sauer for ignoring this issue, because they haven't changed the screw, they haven't done anything to address it, and you can still buy brand new recoil spring assemblies that will break. It's just ridiculous, which I did. But beyond that issue, which is a minor issue, and again, this gun is impressively reliable, Sig Sauer built a fantastic pistol with this gun. They really walked the tightrope between, you know, honoring the original design, because as I've shown, the fundamental mechanics of this gun stay very true to the original. They made some modern innovations with the lockup and, you know, the production methods and everything, some of the materials. Obviously they're using MIM now. That is just kind of what you get when you buy a modern pistol that's not like $3,000. I got this gun for less than $1,000, and I can't think of a gun that is this precisely made, this nicely made, this finely fit, and the finish is impeccable. And it shoots amazingly well. I don't think you'll find a gun this accurate for less than $2,000. I mean, you just won't. I trust this gun implicitly, and it really impressed me by how reliable it was. Like I said, I put all kinds of ammo through it, and you know, I've recently purchased 2 new CZ75 pistols. One's a full size, one's a compact P210, and both those guns had teething issues within the first 100 rounds or so. And I think they're reliable now, but I didn't experience anything like that with this. It has that military grade pedigree that the P210 was originally designed with, and that is alive and well in the American version of it. So in conclusion, going back to this idea of power. Power is your ability to impose your will decisively and effectively. And I don't think there's any gun that exemplifies this definition of power more than the Sig P210. Not because it's boisterous or loud or cantankerous, but because it's not. Because it doesn't need to be. This gun can do more with 8 rounds in its single stack mag than some guns can do with an entire box of ammo. It exemplifies, you know, minimal effort with maximum effect. It is the essence of quality over quantity. It is a man of few words and unfathomable aptitude. It is a phenomenal pistol, and if you value that kind of accuracy and that ability to just be a shot caller, you will love the Sig P210, and I love the Sig P210. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Matt with Hipster Tactical, and I will catch you later.